Hey, welcome to Lunatic Life. I'm just throwing this in there to let everybody know this video was done at the end of a very, very busy day, but I had to get this seal done. So I thought, well, let's film it and I just show you guys my process through it. But just letting you know, I was a little tired. It had been a long day, long week. So I hope you enjoy and get something out of it. It's a great instructional video, should show you what you need to do. But yeah, just a little tired. Anyways, enjoy. Welcome back to the Lunatic Life. Today we're doing more Jeep stuff. Always Jeep stuff. So on my 2018 JKU, the front axle seal is leaking on the driver's side, the inner axle seal. So we're gonna lift it up and go through the procedure on how to change those out. It's pretty involved. Got to take out the carrier, wheel bearings, axles. So there's a bit to go through. But we'll get to it and get some seals done in this baby so they stop leaking. All right. So first things first, we get this baby up in the air. Whether you're jacking it up, putting the front axle on jack stands, or you've got a hoist, lucky enough to have a hoist, get it up in the air and let's get the wheels off this.
All right. Well, I think we're going to have some improved audio here. Got us a new microphone. All right. We're going to get this wheel off and we're going to go from there. On this one, I got a wheel spacer, so that's going to come off too. If you got the wheel spacer, obviously it's going to come off. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick outline of the procedure that we're going to go through, and then I'll show it to you. But what I like to start off with is the ABS wire. Get it unplugged. It's a little bit of a bugger behind the inner fender, but we want to get this unplugged and unhooked off of the brake line, just so we don't damage anything. You want to be real careful with them. They're kind of a sensitive part. Anyways, once we got that, we're going to remove our axle nut, remove our caliper, rotor, wheel bearing, and then axle. So let's get started.
Okay, so our ABS wire comes off the wheel bearing and it's got two little clips right there, come off the ball joint. Just follow it along and just unclip it all the way. And be careful not to tug on the wire itself. You want to just pull on these rubber connections to remove them. If you start tugging on that wire, there's a good chance you're going to separate it inside and you'll be doing a sensor and or wheel bearing. So you're going to want to follow that one up, and it just goes up here and in behind the inner fender, and you'll see up there, it's the other side of the little Christmas trees that hold that in. So you're going to want to pop that out on the other side of the fender and then disconnect the wire. So we'll get the ABS wire off. Can't remove the bugger like I said. But just be patient. Always just be patient. Otherwise you end up breaking something and the job takes twice as long. So our ABS wire is off. Then we go next. Take off the caliper. So compress the caliper. Just a little bit. Like take a screwdriver, just kind of get it in here on the back side of the pad. You don't want to do it on the material side of the pad, the metal side's fine. And just compress that caliper a little bit so it's nice and loose when you want to take it off. Now, normally I would take the caliper off of the bracket and then take the bracket off, just so you can double check that you don't have any seized pins, everything's greased good, the slides are good, that sort of thing. But I just did brakes on this last week, so I don't need to worry about that. But it's always a good idea while you're in there, service the brakes and make sure everything moves freely, and that way you can prevent any problems or find problems. If you have a seized pin or something, fix it at this time. It's going to be the easiest time. So we're going to go ahead, remove caliper and bracket, and then I'm just going to hang it off of a bungee cord, because we don't want to hang it off of this hose. Puts a lot of strain on it, you can tear it. Yeah, it's just not good for it. So let's do it. Okay, so our caliper is off, hanging on a bungee. Let's flex there, nothing's gonna get hurt. So next we're gonna remove the axle nut. And for the axle nut, we're gonna use 36mm hub socket and an impact. Never impact these nuts back on. You can wreck the wheel bearing. I'll remind you again when we put the wheel bearing back in. So the next job we got to do is get the wheel bearing out. It's 3 bolts. Needs a 13mm 12-point socket. 1, 2, 3 in the back. Just be careful you don't round these guys off. They're very easy to round off. The bolts are usually fairly snug. So again, patience. Take your time with it, and you'll get them out. It takes a little work. So I'm just going to tell you now, I only pull these bolts out halfway to start with, and then I'll show you why.
There's one of the bolts, 2, and then one on the opposite side. So let's get those loose. And again, only halfway out. Okay, as you can see, I got the bolt halfway out. Bolt halfway out.
Here, on all 3 of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab a brass drift and a hammer, because the wheel bearings sometimes could be fairly seized in there. They're not so easy to get out, but there's no real easy way to get these out. So if you leave it out halfway, then we're going to grab a hammer. So we're just going to put our brass drift on there like that. See how that moved? Push the bearing out. Now, these bearings have been out recently, so that makes it a lot easier.
But you may struggle. Just go 1, 2, 3. Just go side to side and just tap them out that way. And once you got your wheel bearing loose, then you can pull out your bolts. Okay, our bolts are out. I can just simply remove the wheel bearing. Be careful about the ABS sensor wire. Doesn't get snagged on anything while you take this out. Put it to the side. Now we can pull the axle. Now I'm replacing the seal, so I'm not going to be as gingerly as you probably should be if you're not replacing the seal. Pull it out nice and slow. Try not to damage the seal on the way out. We're replacing the seal. Still not going to yank it crazy hard or anything, but so there we go. Axle is out. We're ready to move to the next part. So in order to get the carrier out, this tie rod's going to have to be removed on one end, and then you can just drop it down. I still hang that off of a bungee too. Don't put any extra stress on the other tie rod, but this is going to have to come off. Okay, so if you have this issue that we have where the nut spins and so does the tie rod itself, you're going to want to grab a pry bar and just put some pressure up to push the taper back into the knuckle, and that should hold it, and your nut will come out. Easy peasy. As you can see, I'm hanging it off a bungee cord. You do you, but that's how I like to do it. I don't like to put any unnecessary strain on anything. So next we're going to drain the front diff because we're going to have to pull the cover. So in this particular Dana 44, there's a drain plug on it. A lot of times you're going to have to just pull the cover to let the fluid drain out, but on this one there's a drain plug on the side. So obviously we're going to use that. Okay, pretty simple. This has got to come off. Undo these bolts all the way around. And so let's take the diff cover off.
So it's also important to note, a lot of times I'll leave a top bolt in, just partially, until we get this cover broke loose so that the cover doesn't just drop on the ground. Right?
So this diff has a locker in it, electric locker factory. So as you can see, we've got the locker wiring, and it's going to go up here into here. So we're going to have to undo this bolt right here, 10 mil, pull this out, disconnect the wire there so that the carrier could come out. So this whole carrier is going to have to come out. But super, super important, these main caps have to go in the same spot and have to go in the same orientation, up, down, etc. So what I like to do is, if you can see here, there's 2 punch marks right here. I'll put 2 punch marks on the cap at the top, so they both match. We know which direction they're going to go in and which side they're going to go on. For the other side, I do 1 punch and 1 punch. See that? So then the orientation is always going to be correct. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take out this bolt, and obviously these 2 bolts for the main cap. Wiggle those off, and just be careful because the carrier itself sometimes could fall out. So put a good hand on there, just to hold it in place while you pull these out. So a little trick, if these main caps aren't coming out very easily, just pull the bolts out a little bit and give that a wiggle back and forth, side to side, up and down, and it'll come out. So our carrier didn't just fall out, which is good. That means there's not a lot of preload on the diff. Could also mean worn bearings, etc. if it just falls out easily. But right here is a shim, and right here is a shim. Also very important, the orientation of these. So you want to keep them side to side. Don't mix them up, or your backlash and your pattern will be out. We are ready to pull out the inner axle seals. Right there is one inner axle seal, and on the other side is the other inner axle seal. So you're going to have to go from the tube on the outside to the inside to punch these out. So I've got a piece of pipe that I use, and I just tap them out with the hammer. Axle seals are out. Had this apart on a weekend. I had to put the wrong ones in because I had received the wrong ones, and I didn't have a choice. I couldn't get any that day, so I put them in. They sealed up for a couple weeks, but now we got to put the proper ones in. Now's a perfect opportunity to get in here and clean out these tubes. Get as much debris and stuff as you can out of there. Then you're not dragging anything in with your axle when you put your axle in. And I mean, I just like things to be clean when I put them together.
This right here is what I use. I've got me a toilet brush and a broom handle. Anyways, depending on what we're doing, if we're doing an axle tube that's going to carry oil, I'll use Varsol on this, and I'll give it just a real good scrub. In this case, probably use a little bit of brake clean and just scrub it out and then blow it out. Make sure there's nothing getting inside the carrier.
Here we got the new spacer seals. That we're going to put in. And we got this seal installer. Got this one off of Amazon. I think it was $60. But it saves you from hammering them in, and a lot of times you can end up damaging them when you hammer them in. So if you own your Jeep, you're probably going to do, well, if you plan on keeping your Jeep for a long time, you're probably going to do more than one set of these seals, especially if you wheel it. So it's worthwhile getting a seal installer. So after I cleaned out the tube, gave it a good spray with brake clean, and I gave this all a good spray with brake clean. Cleaned up this gasket surface, just make sure there's no extra silicone on there. And then just did a good job cleaning up around where the seal goes. You don't really want any sort of contamination in there, or dirt, or anything that's going to stop it from seating properly or sealing. So we just, once we're done, a little brake clean on a rag. Boom. Those ones are clean. And we're going to get ready to punch these seals in. Let's do it. I'm going to show you guys how to set up this tool to install the seals. So first we're going to take our seal and we're just going to place it in there. Put a little bit of pressure on it. Hopefully it's going to kind of sit there for you like that. There's a chance that it's going to fall out, but we're just, as we put in the tool, it should seat into place. So this end is going to go through the seal. Just be careful not to nick the seal as you go in. That's okay, the seal fell out, but we'll place it back in. The other end is going to seat up against the diff housing right here. So we can kind of screw this in. Once we're sitting flat and it's pushing flat on the seal's got no choice but to go in straight, but we're going to do our due diligence here to make sure that it's in place. So press against the seal instead of against the other side, and just hold it flat in place. Now you can adjust your tool until it's sitting flat on both ends. Gets a little pressure on there. Alright, so we're going to have a look. Make sure that that seal is going to go in straight. And it looks like it sure will. So we can grab a wrench and just slowly start pushing in the seal. If you get a lot of resistance, you're going to want to double check that that seal isn't going in crooked. But if it seems like it wants to go in fairly decent, well, then we'll just run it in. So I'm just going to pop this out. We've got it started. Ooh, another earthquake. We got it started. So I'm going to just back this out. And I just want to have a look. Yes, we are definitely going in straight. I just really don't want to do this job again. So we'll run this back up so that everything is flush and we're pushing evenly on the seal. Just like so. And we'll work our way in. So back off the tool once you've got it seated. Pull the tool back and just be careful that you don't nick the seal with these threads as you come out. And we'll just have a little look in here. Seated, nice. And what I like to do is I'll put just a little hair of grease or a little bit of oil on these seals, just so when the axle slides in, we're not nicking anything and it all goes in smooth. But we're ready to start assembling the diff again. Woohoo! It's a good idea to give this a good clean, especially if it hasn't been out for a while. This diff has been apart recently, but I'm still going to give it a good squirt of brake clean. Just give it a quick clean, and then put a little bit of fresh 80-90 on the bearings, just so they're already pre-lubricated. Also, make sure that our races go in on the appropriate side and our shims go in on the appropriate side. And let's wash this up and get it back in there. Our center section is back in. With the locker, this is the position that it's got to be in, and that's why they have this tab right here. The wire we will run up in just a minute, but we're going to torque the main caps first to 80 foot-pounds. I always go over the bolts twice. Now we can fish our wire back up and out of the case. There it is.
And we'll fire a bolt in here. I'm not sure you really need to worry about the actual torque spec on this. Just do it nice and snug, but don't break the bolt. It's an O-ring fit, so it should seal. It doesn't need to be super tight to seal, so.
Our center section is back in, it's torqued, locker hooked back up, all in the appropriate spot. Everything's nice and clean. Gasket surface nice and clean, free of silicone. I've blown out all the holes to make sure that there's nothing in there that could stop the bolts from torquing down. And we will clean up our cover, put some silicone on, and reinstall the cover. So, we got ourselves thin layer of silicone. Gone over this one more time with a little bit of brake clean. Make sure there's no contaminants. We'll run them up lightly with the gun. Then we'll snug them with the ratchet. They don't need to be super tight, just snug. You got silicone that's sealing it anyways. I love brake clean, I love brake clean, yes I do, yes I do. Now we're ready. Clean up and slide in the axles. But first, I'm going to pull out the drain or the fill plug so I don't forget to fill this diff. Sometimes you got to give yourself little reminders. If I see this open, I'll know that I need to put fluid in it. I don't know if some of you all are as forgetful as I can be some days, but when you got a lot going on in the day, these things happen. So there we go. This is all together. Walker's all on. Let's clean up the axles, slide those in, get some wheel bearings in, brakes on. We're done. All right. All right, time for the assembly. We're going to put our axle in and follow that by a wheel bearing, brakes, ABS sensor, tie rod, hub nut. Let's do this. So another thing to note, well, a couple things actually. Well, you got your axle U-joints or your axles out, check your axle U-joints. These ones are good, they're not stiff, they're not loose, they're in good shape. But this will be the time to replace them. So take a close look at them and just make sure that they're in good shape. And the other thing is they got this ring right here that sits on the axle, and that basically helps it locate into the seal as it goes in, keeps it from dropping down into the dirt and the debris and all that kind of stuff. So it's always a good idea to throw that back in when you throw the axle in. So we're going to put that closer to the end. And get that little ring in there. There we go. Just be gentle with it. It's a new fresh seal. And there we go. Before I put my wheel bearing in, I like to put a little anti-seize in here on the wheel bearing surface and on the splines on the shaft. These tend to seize, especially if you're in saltier areas, winter time, etc. These will seize in, so it's a good idea. Put a little anti-seize, makes it a little friendlier to come apart next time. Wheel bearings in. I haven't run the ABS wire yet. That'll be done after we get the brake caliper on. So we're going to torque these 13 mil 12 points to 75 foot-pounds of torque. Now wheel bearings on, we're going to move on to the brakes. I like to use blue Loctite
on the caliper mount bolts. There's a lot of heat and vibration there, so these bolts can loosen off if they're not torqued properly and or Loctited. So we're going to Loctite them. Just going to get those started by hand. Then I'll just run them up with the gun. And we'll torque them with the torque gun. Caliper mount bolts are going to get torqued to 100 foot-pounds of torque. Oh, we still got her set to 75. That was easy. All right. Again, I always double check my torques. There we go. At this point, we can start our hub nut. But I'm going to move on and get the ABS wire hooked up and ran. That's the next step.
We're closing in on the end of this job. Last couple orders of business is we're going to put the tie rod to the knuckle, torque that down. Then we're going to torque our hub nut and fill our diff. That's it. That's where we're at. Then you can throw your wheels on. So let's do this. So we got our tie rod just set in there, not started, but just like when we took it out, this shaft right here, the taper is going to want to spin in the knuckle. So we're just going to take a pry bar, push that taper up into the knuckle. I'm going to run it down just till it touches with the gun. All right, we're touched, and now we'll torque to 63 foot-pounds. Second to last, we're going to torque the hub nut. Hub nut's going to get torqued to 100 foot-pounds. So to prevent the turning of the rotor and the hub, I just put a pry bar or a screwdriver in there, and then we're going to run this up by hand. Don't use an impact. You'll Brunel the bearings, and they won't last very long. Maybe a year, maybe less. The old bearings, it seemed like you were able to run up with an impact without a problem. That's how we used to always do it, but I started getting comebacks on wheel bearings. So started running them up by hand and never had a problem again. So take that as you will, but I think we kind of figured out the issue. All right, trusty torque wrench. We're going to torque to 100 foot-pounds. Click. Always double check. Click. You can take that out of there, install your wheel. And last, and probably one of the most important things in this, let's get some fluid in this thing. So I checked the books. This one calls for just straight 80-90. So that's what we're going to do. All right. Whew. Well, that was some work, eh? Diff is full. Boom. Everything's done. Axles are in. Brakes are on. ABS wires are run. Just do a double check over everything. Just make sure you didn't forget anything. Drain plug is tight. Fill plug's tight. And if you haven't, like I said earlier, throw your wheels on. Take it off the jack stands. And make sure you do a proper torque on the wheels. Well, that concludes our inner axle seal job on a Jeep JK. It's going to be the same whether it's a Dana 30, Dana 44. They're all done the same way. This is Dana 44, so possibly Dana 30 may have different torque specs, but I'm guessing we're very close, aside from maybe main cap bolts. But I hope you got something out of it, and it helped you out. So thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you next time.